Welcome to Bahamian Mathematics, a channel dedicated to making math tutorials to make math easy to learn. If these videos are helpful, please subscribe, like, and share to receive future videos. In today's video, we will learn how to use a protractor properly to measure angles. Let's look at the definition of what an angle is. In an earlier video, we saw that an angle is the shape formed when two rays meet at a vertex. Here are two rays. The point at which they meet is called the vertex, but this now is called an angle. Here is the vertex, the point at which the two rays have in common. The space in between gives us the number of degrees the angle has. But how do we measure an angle? Well, we have to use a special device known as a protractor, and it looks like this. But on the protractor, you will notice that there are often two scales, and each one starts at 0 and goes all the way around to 180. We'll notice that 0 here goes all the way around to the other side to 180. This is the inside scale. But if you notice on that scale at 180, you will have another 0 in black that goes all the way around the other side to 180. That is known as the outside scale. So depending on how the angle is positioned, we will have to know which scale to use. Let's look at this angle here. If we start with the horizontal ray and imagine that is 0 and the other ray opens up in this direction, we will have to find the scale on the protractor that starts with 0 on the right. And here is the 0 that starts on the right. That is the inside scale. And so if we position the angle properly onto the protractor with the vertex in the middle of the protractor, we can see that the angle opens up and the other ray stops here. And that is the point at which we will take our measurement for the size of the angle. So we're using the inside scale because 0 started on the right hand side where the ray that we used was running horizontally. If we expand this a little more to see the numbers, we can see that sometimes we get confused as to which scale to use. We see 50 and 60 and 120 and 130 in blue. Because we already established that we're using the inside scale, we can cross out the 50 and 60, knowing that it is one of the numbers between 120 and 130. And if we look to see where the ray has stopped, it is between 120 and 130. And if we extend that up, we can start to count 121, 122, 123, 124, 125 is where the ray stops. And so our answer is the size of this angle is 125 degrees. We know that is an obtuse angle. Now let's flip that same angle around and see if it works with the other scale. We'll notice this time that the ray that runs from left to right or horizontally is at the left. And if the ray opens up, we can see that it stops here. And so we have to choose the scale where 0 starts at the left-hand side. And that's right here. That's using the outside scale this time. And so if we position the angle in place with the vertex right in the center of the protractor, normally at a little plus sign, we can see there it is at the vertex. Everything is lined up properly. If it is not lined up exactly on the vertex, you will get an incorrect reading. So this is crucial to make sure that you line it up exactly at the point where the vertex is. Now we can see that it goes from 0 all the way around to where the other ray has stopped. And if we look at the scale, this is now the reading that we have to take. But we have to be very sure what the reading is. So we're going to expand that out a little bit and see again we have two scales. But we've already established that we're using the outside scale, which is the black numbers. So we will cross out the blue numbers and we will try to determine where the ray has stopped. We can see that it's between 120 and 130. And so we're going to count again 121, 122, 123, 124, 125. And the answer is 125 degrees. The same answer we got on the previous slide. Now let's look at another angle. This angle here, if we start with the ray that runs horizontally, and we imagine that that is our 0 starting point, the ray opens up like this. And so because of this, we're going to use the inside scale because 0 is on the right-hand side. And so putting the angle in place, positioning the vertex on the little plus crosshair on the protractor, making sure that is lined up, we can see that the angle opens like this from 0 all the way to where the ray stops. We take the reading, we expand that out again, and notice again 120 and 60, 130 and 50. Which scale do we use? Well, we know we're using the inside scale, which is the blue scale. So we will cross out the black numbers and determine that where is the ray pointing exactly. Well, if you look at it very carefully, it looks like it is not quite to 60. And so the number that is right before 60 is 59. And so this angle is 59 degrees. We know that's an acute angle. Let's look at one more. What happens now if the angle that we are given does not have a ray that runs perfectly horizontally? Let's see what happens. If we put the protractor on top, we'll notice that neither ray starts at 0. And so what do we do when this is the case? Well, we know we have to have a ray that we have to place on top of a 0 starting point. And so all we simply have to do, here's a 0 that is closest to one of the rays. And it's best to use the 0 that is closest to one of the rays. Now all we have to do is tilt the protractor until the 0 lines up with the ray. We're also being careful that the vertex lines up with the middle of the protractor. And now you can see the 0 has shifted. Here is now the 0 underneath of the ray, and it opens up like this. And so the other ray, we look at the scale, and we can see, using the outside scale, because that is where the 0 started, our answer is 70 degrees. And that is an acute angle. Let's look at another one. How big is this angle here? Before we even place the protractor, we can see that it is almost a straight line. And so it is going to be obtuse. It is going to be almost 180 degrees, and that helps us to determine, before we even put the protractor on, an idea of its size and which scale to use. Let's put the protractor on. Again, we can see that neither ray lines up with 0. And so in order to read this properly, we have to move the protractor in place so that one of the rays lines up with the 0. And again, the easiest thing to do is to choose a ray that is closest to a 0 scale. And in this question, the ray at the right is closest to 0. So all we have to do is tilt the protractor so that it lines up with the 0. Now you can see the vertex is lined up in the middle. The 0 has now shifted. And we take the reading at the ray. We're using the inside scale because that is where the 0 is. And here is our reading now between 140 and 150. And if we look very carefully, here is 140. And the ray passes through almost halfway between 140 and 150. And so if we count 141, 2, 3, 4, 144 degrees, the size of this angle is 144 degrees. And now it's quiz time. You have 5 seconds to answer the following. What is the device called used to measure angles? Time's up. The answer is a protractor. Question 2. What unit are angles measured in? Time's up. The answer is degrees. In this slide, we can see 144 degrees and 70 degrees. Question 3. What is the size of the angle shown? Is it 80 degrees or 100 degrees? You have 5 seconds. Time's up. The answer is 100 degrees. We can see that the right ray starts at 0, which is the inside scale, the blue scale, and it goes all the way around to the other ray, which lands at 100. We also can see that this is a little bit bigger than a right angle, which looks like an L. And because of that, it has to be bigger than 90, and therefore this is 100 degrees. Question 4. What is the size of the angle shown? 5 seconds. Time's up. The answer is 45 degrees. Again, the ray at the right starts at 0 using the inside scale, the blue scale. And the other ray stops between 40 and 50, and so the answer is 45 degrees. Last question. Question 5. What is the size of the angle shown? 30 degrees or 150 degrees? 5 seconds. Time's up. The answer is 30 degrees. Again, we can see that the ray sits on the 0 using the outside scale, the black scale. And the other ray stops at 30, and therefore this is 30 degrees. We also know that this is smaller than a right angle because a right angle looks like an L, and this is smaller than that. And now you've solved the mystery of how to measure angles using the protractor. Great job.